Marie Sklodowska, a young Polish woman living in Paris at the turn of the 20th century, was desperate for work. She had little money and was competing with many other highly qualified candidates for a job that didn't even pay very well. But she desperately needed the money and was willing to take it. It was the only job she could find, and so she applied. The job was to watch over the cadavers in the laboratory after hours. For a while, this went on as one of the few jobs available to women at the time. And then her professor finally gave her an actual research position. Her name was Maria Salomea Sklodowska, but you probably know her better by her married name, Madame Marie Curie. In this video, we'll look at the life and biography of Madame Marie Curie, the amazing scientist who pioneered our understanding of radioactivity and was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. We will also see how she ended up being the only person to win Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields. This is the incredible story of Madame Marie Curie. Maria Sklodowska was born in Warsaw, Poland on November 7, 1867. At the age of 4, she moved to a small village where her father became the headmaster of a high school. When she was 10 years old, her mother died, and 5 years later, her father remarried. He married a woman named Josephine Boguska, who became the stepmother of Maria and her siblings. But unfortunately, she was not a good stepmother and treated Maria and her siblings like servants. In fact, she was so cruel that Maria never forgave her and never called her stepmother by her first name. From an early age, Maria showed a great interest in science and mathematics, which was quite unusual for girls at the time. After graduating from high school in 1883, she wanted to study at the Sorbonne in Paris, but this was impossible because women were not admitted. So instead, she went to study at a secret floating university in Warsaw, where people would meet in secret to discuss scientific ideas. Although she excelled at the university, she did not graduate since she did not want to get a degree from a non-accredited institution. Instead, she studied privately and took exams to earn university credits. Meanwhile, to be able to afford studying in Paris, she worked as a governess, teaching children in wealthy families. After saving up enough money, she enrolled at the Sorbonne in 1891 and graduated with a degree in physics and mathematics 4 years later. While studying, she met her future husband, Pierre Curie, who was an instructor at the university. They got married in 1895. At this point in history, scientists believed that radiation came from only 2 sources, uranium and thorium. And that's why the Curies decided to start their own research into these elements. But soon they realized that if they wanted to make any progress in their research, they would have to do something no one had ever done before. They would have to isolate new radioactive elements from tons of pitchblende, a mineral that contains uranium. The Curies started by collecting tons of pitchblende from mines in the Czech Republic. They rented a small apartment with a backyard, which they used as a makeshift laboratory. But this was not enough space, so they moved to a shed in the garden of Madame Curie's parents' house. In this small shed without proper ventilation or safety measures, the Curies spent almost a year processing the tons of rock. They slept in a room filled with sacks of pitchblende, and both became seriously ill several times. But still, they continued their work. Finally, in 1898, after 2 years of backbreaking work, they managed to isolate 2 new radioactive elements, polonium and radium. Polonium was named after Maria's native country, Poland, which at that time was under the rule of the Russian Empire and was not allowed to have its own name. The discovery of these elements brought the Curies worldwide fame. In 1903, along with Henri Becquerel, they were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for their work on radioactivity. This made Marie Curie the first woman to receive a Nobel Prize. Unfortunately, the prize money was shared equally between the 3 winners, so each received only 1/3 of the prize money. But since Marie was a woman and her husband Pierre was a Frenchman, they had trouble opening a bank account in their joint names. And so the prize money was paid out to Pierre, and the Nobel Committee even apologized to Marie for this humiliating situation. When Marie heard this, she said, "It is not I who am humiliated. but France. Despite all the difficulties, the Curies continued their research into radioactivity. But in 1906, everything changed. One day, while walking down a busy street, Pierre suddenly stepped on a stone that came loose from the pavement and hit his head on the ground. He died instantly. This terrible accident devastated Marie. But besides being widowed, she now also had to provide for her 2 young daughters alone. She was offered a professorship at the University of Paris, which would have made her the first woman to hold a chair at the Sorbonne. But she turned it down because the position was only offered to her on condition that she would not perform any research. She couldn't accept this since she needed the money for her family, and doing no research would mean losing her funding. And so she was forced to leave the Sorbonne. But she was determined to continue her late husband's work, and so she accepted a professorship at the University of Paris' medical school. There she met her future collaborator and eventually successor, a brilliant physicist named Frédéric and Joliot. After completing her term at the medical school, she returned to the Sorbonne in 1911 as a full professor. She was the first woman to hold a full professorship at the university. When World War I broke out in 1914, Marie was strongly opposed to the war, but when she learned that wounded soldiers needed X-ray machines, she became actively involved. With her knowledge of radioactivity, she developed mobile X-ray units to be used at the front. These units were mounted on cars and trains so they could be quickly transported to the front lines. She even personally visited the battlefields to distribute the units. In total, Marie designed about 100 of these mobile X-ray units, which saved countless lives. But it wasn't until the end of the war that the world began to recognize the dangers of radiation. Now, many of the doctors and military personnel who had worked with these X-ray units suffered from radiation sickness and died. Marie Curie herself also suffered from the effects of radiation throughout her life and eventually died from aplastic anemia. After the end of the war, Marie continued her research into radioactive elements and trained new generations of scientists. But during World War II, when Germany occupied France, she once again put her knowledge to good use. She helped smuggle scientists out of France and organized a network of resistors to help downed Allied airmen escape back to Great Britain. In addition, she donated large quantities of radium and polonium to hospitals across the country so that doctors could use them to treat patients. Because of her commitment to the French resistance, the Gestapo placed her and her daughter under surveillance. However, she managed to avoid detection and remained active until the end of the war. After the war, Marie returned to her research and taught at the university. She died on July 4, 1934, at the age of 66. She had been suffering from leukemia, which she most likely contracted as a result of her pioneering work with radioactive materials. Besides the Nobel Prize in Physics, Marie Curie was also awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1911 for the discovery of radium and polonium. No one has ever won Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields, so Marie Curie is unique in this respect. While researching radioactivity, the Curies made some very important discoveries that changed our understanding of the atom. Today, we know that every element can be transformed into another element through nuclear reactions. But at the time of the Curies, it was believed that radium and uranium were the final elements. The Curies proved this wrong, and not only that, their research paved the way for many other scientists to follow in their footsteps. For example, the Curies discovered that atoms are the smallest unit of an element that still retain the chemical properties of that element. They also discovered that atoms can be split, which led to the development of nuclear weapons. Although radioactivity is a dangerous phenomenon, it has many positive applications. Radioactive isotopes are used to sterilize medical equipment, food, and water. They are also used in cancer therapy and in geological dating. Radioactivity is also used in industry to check the thickness of materials and to detect leaks. Marie Curie's discovery of radioactivity completely changed our understanding of the atom and the world around us. It opened up whole new areas of science and technology. And it is amazing to think what else she might have discovered if she had not died so young. What do you think? What else might Marie Curie have discovered if she hadn't died so young? Let us know in the comments below. Also, please subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. See you next time.